Hello, my name is Keith Kreischer. I'm the Executive Director of the IMC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to Track 4 within our IoT Days Winter event presented by the IoT M2M Council. The topic for this track is bundles, what's new in turnkey systems for IoT, and we'll be hearing from companies that are out there doing it. So looking forward to this. You can see the full schedule in the resources section of your interface. Allow me to start off by just saying, hey, I hope everyone in our audience and among our panelists and presenters is staying safe and well in these times that are obviously very interesting. Before we begin, we wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets that you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. This webcast is being streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your computer speakers or headset are turned up and the volume is up so you can hear the presenters. If your slides are delayed, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. An on-demand version of this webcast will be made available later today and can be accessed using the same audience link sent to you earlier. If you have any any questions during the webcast, and this is important, you can submit them through the Q&A widget at any time. The presenters may answer the questions at the end of each session, but please feel free to ask them as we go along. Any unanswered questions will be responded to offline. So if we don't get to your question during the live webcast, never fear. We will have your conference registration associated with your questions, and we will get back to you. Now, just a quick word about the IMC for those on the call that may not know us. The IMC is the largest trade association serving the IoT sector, with 25,000 qualified enterprise users, product makers and designers, and apps developers that deploy IoT solutions as rank-and-file adopter members. The IMC Board of Governors is comprised of 35 or so of the most influential IoT solutions providers. Those include some very large companies that you know, Microsoft Azure, Vodafone, Quectel, Tata Communications, but also smaller companies that are providing cutting-edge technologies. So if you're an IoT adopter, please join us to access our conferences, our template RFP program, our surveys, and generally best-in-class IoT content. And if you're a solutions provider, please join us to access the largest community of IoT adopters for purposes of thought leadership, lead generation, promotion, and research. And with that, I pass along to my very good friend, Jim Morrish, who is one of the principals at Transforma Insights. Jim, good afternoon, and take us away.
Good afternoon, Keith. Thank you for that. Yes, I'm Jim Morrish. I'm half of the founding partners of Transforma Insights, and I'll be your moderator for this afternoon's session. So just to recap, as Keith mentioned, this is a session on IoT bundles, and specifically what's new in turnkey solutions for IoT deployments, looking at businesses that want to connect devices and track assets in their own operations or embed products that they make with connectivity, and figuring out ways to make that more easy and make configuring with IoT a little less daunting and a little simpler. So I have four great panelists with me this afternoon. I've got Mike Fahrion, who's the CTO of MultiTech. I've got Mobeen Khan, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Blues Wireless. Ganesh Sivaraman, who's the Senior Product Development of Marketing for IoT at Nimblelink, and Sundar Somasundaran, who's SVP Fleet Management and Industrial IoT at Core. So the way we're going to run this panel is each of my panelists has a couple of slides just by way of introduction to themselves and to introduce their company and some of the perspectives. And then we'll move into a panel discussion where we'll just be free flow discussion. And at that point, if anybody sends in any questions, they will be gratefully received, and I will pick them up from the chat box and try and sequence them into a sensible order and pose them to our panelists. So please do send in those questions. And at that point, I think what I should do is I should stop there, and I should invite Mike Fahrion to present a couple of introductory slides from MultiTech.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. My name is Mike Fahrion. I am the CTO of MultiTech. And MultiTech is a 50-year-old hardware designer and manufacturer, these days especially in wireless data connectivity products. And very specifically, we've found over the last several years, the LoRaWAN part of our portfolio in terms of sensing and gateways has really been exploding. But that said, it's been exploding in a way that we anticipated happening, maybe more than 5 or even 10 years ago. We were starting to talk about all the benefits of IoT, and now we're talking digital transformation. And obviously, it took a long time to really start to come to fruition. And what we've seen is there's really 2 main sources of friction that have been the primary causes of just pain and so many failed proof of concepts and things like that. So one side of that coin is the integration friction, right? So if you're a solutions provider or you're a field service provider, you're an equipment OEM, and you wanted to have a connected product, connected service, and start to down that digital transformation journey, there are just so many layers of that network stack to get that connected solution. And a lot of it looked easier on the surface, or maybe it was marketed as easier on the surface than what you would actually find. And that's where just so many projects got really stuck in trying to integrate all the different layers of that connectivity stack, all the way from a sensor, all the way to the cloud, and then to the business analytics and things that can really drive transformation in your business. So that's one side of the friction, and that's the side that all of us here as vendors and suppliers are working really hard to simplify, whether it's through standards and ecosystems and just integrating, taking away the friction of connecting these different layers together. The other side that doesn't get talked about nearly as much, although it's starting to get a lot more oxygen now, is the business side friction. That's a piece that's harder for us to help with, because this is really all about change management within your organization as an OEM or service provider. So just bringing you data from your remote assets or from your connected services or things like that, that doesn't bring value in itself. That doesn't add value to your organization until you start to make process changes. That also means organizational changes in many cases. You've got to change contracts, your customer relationships change, your vendor relationships change, and even your employee relationships can change. You'll often find that incentives internally are all of a sudden misaligned. You had a whole service organization that was perhaps incented by a number of successful truck rolls. And now you realize that, well, truck rolls is not the goal, right? That's, you've got to change those incentives. And it comes down to like the fundamentals of change management. So what we at MultiTech have done to try to solve the left side of that problem, the integration friction, so you can really focus on the right side of the problem is in the business integration, is we're just now launching a solution we call MultiTech OneBox. And this is specifically targeted to folks that need sensor data from the edge of the network. So you need to get sensing data from your cold chain, your supply chain, warehouse operations. And you want to, as an overlay network, bring that sensor data up into your application layer. So what we did here, we're using LoRaWAN technologies, which we've had a long history with as a founding member of the LoRaWAN Alliance. We built an entire solution on open standards and open architecture that includes, in a single box, you get 5 different LoRaWAN sensors, things like temperature, humidity, water detection, contact closures, things like that. It includes a gateway that comes pre-activated with a LTE SIM. And I might say that in all these solutions, there's an ecosystem involved. And this is one example where that activated LTE SIM that comes in this LoRaWAN gateway is actually from one of our ecosystem partners on this call, Core. So we pulled together that relationship for you. We've also put the LoRaWAN network server as part of this package, so you don't have to go architect the network management side of things. And it's got a confirmed alarm and notification engine, so you can get some value out of those sensors, really prove your business concept, get the proof of value done, a simple data visualization dashboard so you can validate all that data. And then also a simple provisioning app. So your installers can simply scan a QR code on the sensor and automatically provision it up into your system. That's nice to have in a starter box like this, but where it's really important is when you start thinking about deploying tens of thousands of sensors in the field. Really helps with scale. So our solution here is really to say, let's let's take out that 6 months of integration that the customers tended to struggle with as they had to integrate this layers of the stack, and give something that a non-technical user could take this box and in 15 minutes be getting data from sensors attached to their assets, up into a visualization layer and a notification engine. And then recognizing that down the road, they can take out any one of these layers. This is not a proprietary end-to-end solution. It's all open architecture. If you want to add other third-party LoRaWAN sensors into the system, you could do so. If you wanted to replace the LoRa network server with a public server or your own private server, you could easily do so. This is all meant to get you out of the box and prove that business value, so you can focus as a OEM or as a solutions provider on the right side of that friction and change management.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And we'll move on to Mobeen Khan of Blues Wireless.
Thank you, Jim and Keith, for the invite. Thank you, everybody, for joining. My name is Mobeen Khan. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Blues Wireless. We are a young IoT company based out of Boston. And I have spent many years in the IoT industry, like my panelists here, and actually colleagues with Sundar here as well in my past at AT&T. IoT solutions building at scale is complex. Anyone can get the componentry to put a prototype, but going from a prototype to a pilot is relatively difficult, and then going from a pilot stage to a scaled deployment of any kind that your enterprise is going to depend on is very complex. And when somebody's building up a prototype, they're not really going through all the issues they're going to face with at the scale stage. And so that's a problem I saw over and over again when I was at AT&T, and that led us to build a set of bundles that we could take an engineer, a developer, a product manager to start with a prototype of whatever they're trying to connect, an existing asset like a water heater or a rat trap, and then move that all the way to thousands and thousands of units of deployment. The thing that is really, IoT and machine-to-machine has been around for a number of years. I think what is really pushing the industry right now is the whole, on the industrial side, there's the whole push for Industry 4.0. And on the enterprise side, there's digital transformation pushes coming through or productivity pushes coming through. And in the past, people have focused on people and processes to automate. And most of the automation there has been done through SaaS services and so on. But what has been missing is bringing remote assets into that digitization. And so it's a good time for us to be in this business, and the panelists here and other companies are trying to remove that complexity. And Blues Wireless is also part of that, removing the complexity. And we've innovated in a couple of ways. Number one, on the hardware side, similar to what Mike was describing, we have put a set of starter bundles for engineers to get started with, and get to a prototype and even get to a pilot very, very quickly, not having to worry about a lot of the separate componentry that you need to buy from a dozen different vendors. But more importantly, we've paid a lot of attention to the business model, which is included cellular with your commercial deployments. And that really is resonating very well with customers that are looking to deploy these in tens of thousands using cellular. And the model is very much consumption-based. You pay for what you use, and you don't pay for what you don't use. And so those kind of, Mike talked about, the friction on the business side. There are certain things we don't control, like the internal organization things, of course. But on the business model side and on the ROI side, we can certainly build a business model that is very welcoming to customers. And then finally, our focus a lot is on the developer and the engineer. And for that, there's a bunch of bundles. I'm not going to bore you through that. If anybody is interested, go to blues.io or blues.io.use cases and see those. I'll mention for a minute a couple of types of use cases that we are seeing a lot of traction in, and I'm sure other panelists will talk about as well. Healthcare, we're seeing a lot of traction. A lot of people building all kind of medical devices, health devices, remote patient monitoring devices, and we're seeing some traction in that area. Agriculture and in general, machine monitoring is another area that we're seeing a lot of traction in, and people embedding the note card into their existing assets, through electrical connections and software connections. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mubin. Next up, we have Ganesh from NimbeLink.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. So I'm Ganesh Shivaraman, based out of here in Boston, part of Airgain and NimbeLink. So for those who don't know, NimbeLink got acquired by Airgain exactly a year ago. And Airgain is based out of San Diego, and NimbeLink is based out of Minnesota. And what I want to kind of talk to you guys in the allotted time is a couple of different things. And I think both of my previous panelists actually covered a few key points. And I wanted to kind of bring the conversation to a different level from a customer-first approach and from an outside-in approach. I joined the company 6-7 months ago. I've been in the telecom industry and in the software industry for 20 plus years. And what I've seen is everything goes through a cycle. And I think Mubin actually said M2M has been around forever. I used to be at Nokia way back when, and we used to have M2M even then, back in like 2000s. And we had Coca-Cola vending machines with a Nokia phone built in. And we used to use carrier billing to buy Coke. So what has changed really? Nothing much. We are still doing the same thing in different ways. I think the level playing field for IoT in general is very flat and very broad, and allows for so many different ecosystem players to play in. And the reason why that is a fact is because the market in IoT is more or less fragmented. And there is no one player or even a handful of players that's going to dominate the IoT market, controlling 60 to 80% of the market, because the use cases and the customer requirements are so different that there is no one player that's going to cater and capture that entire market. We can talk about different use cases, different verticals, different geographies, etc. So there is no one dominant player. If you look at in the cell phone industries or even in the carriers, you can really say the top 5 or the top 10 in the world, as well as in every region. You don't see that happen in the IoT space in general. And that basically makes the solution play really important, and helping the customers imagine what their problem is and how easily those problems can be solved. So what are the different layers if you think it from a customer lens rather than from a technology and from a vendor lens? It's essentially 4 layers. There may be other nuances, and you can actually slice those layers into other layers as well. And that's around device connectivity, device management, and application. And if you see it from that lens and what the customer has to go through, it's a whole slew of jigsaw puzzles or Lego blocks, however you want to create that analogy, and they have to put together that. So the onus is on us as an industry to help that customer problem solve in a very simple way. And I think Mike also mentioned that one of the biggest challenges in IoT in general is the customers are not really able to solve the ROI to the TCO problem. So again, the onus is on us to really do the proof of value process in such a way that the finance department and the CIOs and the COOs can really justify that. And I go through that every day when I'm talking to some of the largest customers, and they bring not just the buyer, they bring the finance guys also to justify what that ROI and the TCO is going to look like. And one of the biggest pet peeve for the customers in the industry is TCO. TCO is the biggest challenge that the industry is facing right now. And I don't think we are solving it in a meaningful way collectively. And as I said, there's no one or two dominant players. We need to kind of essentially come together and solve that problem for the industry and ultimately solving the problems for the customer. And And since Moby and Sundar were from AT&T and I was from Nokia, the one guy that actually changed all of that in the smartphone industry was Apple. And we need to kind of think it that way, that disruption model. And I'm glad that Moby was talking about how he's thinking as the usage-based model. And kudos to Blues, because they're truly doing that, which AWS and the other hyperscalers have done in the cloud side to bring that to that level. So the way we are trying to go about this is an API first approach. So we do not want to essentially build everything all the way up to the layers. We want to give flexibility to the customers, because some customers are very sophisticated, some are not. And the customers who are not sophisticated, or there are things that are internally that are preventing them to build the visualizations or the analytics, we essentially bring turnkey solutions to them. So I think the market is kind of going to oscillate between the two spectrums, where some are going to require a full-baked solution and some are going to require an API-first approach. And we will have to, as an industry, we will have to essentially be flexible in our offer. So, and this is essentially kind of a more food for thought and opening the discussions, Jim, with the rest of the panel, is that I truly believe the theme that we are all going through, and especially for me at AirGain and NimbleLink, and this is the big vision, this is why it's so exciting, and I think we're all doing that in one way or the other, is essentially connecting the unconnected. That's the theme. And how big the market is, how big the problems are, how many different verticals and geos, we can slice and dice that market, but we have to make it super simple. And that's kind of my core charter and goal, is that how am I simplifying that? Not necessarily just talking about speed and fees and technology and whether it's LPWAN or LoRaWAN or something, understanding the customer problems and the use cases and the ROI and the TCO, and bring the ecosystem players with me. I have a different approach. I'm not going to win in this market all by myself. I need to find the right partners to win in this market together. So it's the better together story, which is what we are trying to go, and ultimately unlock the bigger ocean of connecting the unconnected. I think that's my time. Thank you, Jim. Look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Ganesh. And then our last panelist, last but not least, Sundar Somasandru of Core.
Yep. Thank you very much. Very good morning to everybody here. And interesting. Every single one of the panelists here is a partner of Core in some shape or form, and work with everybody here over the years. Across the ecosystem. So from a Core perspective, we are a global leader in IoT. As you can see, we started out from a connectivity, connecting IoT devices perspective. We have since expanded from there. We are actually now the largest sort of IoT services provider, only sort of MVNO provider in the top right of the Gartner quadrant. I'm not going to read out the statistics here, but you can see the scale at which we operate. So our entire premise is based around helping customers in 5 key verticals: healthcare, manufacturing, communication services, transportation, to really enable IoT solutions. So where Core really comes in is we focus on helping our customers put together different components, as everybody else in the panel indicated, right? IoT is super hard, and at Core, like the others, our mission is to simplify IoT, and we have basically now come up with solutions that allow these customers in these verticals to take the hardware, connectivity, services, and put them together and build a solution that they can then take to market, right? So one example that I'll just talk about, and I said, I talked about 5 verticals, but one key one that's been around for a while in IoT is fleet management, right? And I think fleet management right now, more than ever, is very pertinent, just because of everything that we're seeing in the supply chain ecosystems. And I'll go over a few use cases during our discussion, but at a high level for us, fleet management is focused on 4 key, what I would call as use case bundles, starting with fleet telematics, which is really location of the asset or vehicle, cargo logistics, one of our fastest growing areas in terms of visibility, not just into the location of your cargo, but more importantly, how it interfaces with the rest of the chain in the supply chain. Usage-based insurance, some of our largest customers are in this space, which is really insights based on driving behavior that insurance companies are looking for. I'm sure a lot of the audience here is familiar with devices that go in their cars that look at driving behavior, things like harsh braking, and then they get their premium goes down based on good driving. So we have a lot of customers in that space. That's another key use case that we serve. And last but not least is the fleet dash cam. Again, this is another fast-growing area. Really leverages a lot of AI and machine learning to help customers identify, driver behavior, harsh braking, especially, I'll give you an example from one of our customers. When they have one of these big trucks have any kind of an accident or an issue, generally the impact is pretty significant, running into millions of dollars in terms of the insurance payments. Now with these cameras, they're actually able to point out that the issue was not actually with the truck driver, but it was actually caused by another car that actually caused the accident. So they were actually able to save a lot of their insurance costs just by proving that out. So definitely seeing things like video cameras being adopted, and also from a driver coaching perspective. If your driver is distracted because there's an in-cab camera, and if the driver's smoking, against policy. So, again, from a use case bundles, these are all things that we provide from a hardware connectivity and services perspective. We don't go after the end customer. We don't go sell to an end customer with these solutions. What we provide is an enablement. And then we have our partners that take these solutions to end customers as a full-blown solution. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much, Sundar. So that's the end of our introductions. I've had a couple of questions coming in, a couple of quite good questions. We'll get to those not immediately, but quite soon. So if there are any other questions, please put them into that chat box and send them in. But thank you all of you for your introductions and overviews of your business and your perspectives on this market. Just starting off with a general question, how are end user markets changing? The markets that you collectively are selling to, and then on into the markets and end users that those companies are selling to?
Yeah, I could take a stab at that, Jim. From my perspective, and it's been interesting. And I would say the tragedy of the pandemic here has been an accelerator for a number of things on a technology front. So a lot of projects that were being toyed with as POCs and things before, around better use of field staff and just all the different things you do for improvements in productivity and asset utilization. All of a sudden, those things went from nice to haves to must to haves over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. We have customers with big field service fleets, and what they used to have is a very predictable business. They were servicing commercial buildings or stadiums and public event areas, and it was all done on the old-fashioned calendar-based. We're going to make 2 visits a week. We're going to empty this. We're going to dump that. We're going to clean this. And all of a sudden, they had a number of problems. They had a labor shortage with that field staff. They had a non-predictable customer base. All of a sudden, you go to service a commercial building, and you might find that nobody's been in there for the last 2 quarters. You don't need to go there twice a week, or you go there and there's, with COVID protocols, much more expensive time-wise for the driver to be able to get inside a third-party facility. So all of a sudden, these things where they had been working on some of these things in the background, they became just vastly accelerated. And if anything else around change management, sometimes it takes a crisis to really get everybody on board to facilitate change. And that's something we've seen happen over the last couple of years. And just an acceptance and a willingness and an understanding to say, okay, not just the cost savings this provides us, but the agility, the digital transformation in IoT provides us. is much more recognized, I think, up and down the organization to say, look, this is something we have to do.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. From an industry perspective, I know the question was about the end users, but we're seeing a trend across the industry. And Mike addressed sort of the pandemic issues, right, and things that came out of it. So, transportation, and I said like supply chain has been part of IoT end-to-end for a while now. And Mobeen and I actually in the past have worked with one of the largest container transportation companies in the world. To transport a container in 2016 from China to the US was about $500. The cost last year was about $21,000, right? So that's a 40x increase in price, right? So now you have companies that are getting, the big guys, the Amazons of the world, they have their own, sort of ways to transport these things, and they're able to manage this, right? We're really seeing a lot of IoT adoption is among some of these smaller, medium-sized players, where now their cost has just gone up 40x, so they need to be really smart about how they're optimizing. And if you start looking at the different pieces in terms of, between the seller to the manufacturer to the trucking company, to then, offloading that here in the US and then getting it to the end user, there's a lot of coordination that happens. And we're seeing tons of IoT applications, especially in those areas, not just, like I said, tracking the container, but how full is my container? Because, less than container load, LCL, is a lot cheaper than having the full thing. So now you're seeing coordination that's happening across multiple businesses that are viewing the same data, right, that's coming out of these containers, but then are able to optimize their, their shipping and their planning from a supply chain perspective.
Yeah, the last thing I'll add to this is the procurement models have changed. Hyperscalers and companies like Slack and Airtable and all these SaaS application companies have tuned the buyers to be used to a consumption-based model. And that is changing. And it is forcing the industry, the IoT industry, to change its pricing and go-to-market strategies. So I think what we will see, we're already started to see this with companies like NimbleLink and Core and us and Blues Wireless, but a lot of companies in this space are going to change to match the procurement model changes in the IT industry in general.
Yeah, and I'll just add one to what Mobeen was saying. 2021 for us was, even though there was pandemic and supply chain, gut and all of that, we actually saw tremendous growth in our IoT business within NimbleLink itself. It was one of the best years for us. And 2022 is not going to be much different from that perspective as well. And the reason why we saw that is, yes, we have a very diverse pool of customers because we have folks who are using embedded modem for cellular connectivity into their end device products. And then we have battery-powered asset trackers, which goes into a whole lot of different things, including in supply chain and logistics, as other panelists were talking about. And I think the key driver for all of that is, even though there were supply chain pressures and the overall TCOs was going up, there were specific business insights that the customers were very keen to tap into. So it's not that they were basically flipping the switch and saying that let's deploy this program across the board, but they were being very selective in how they can essentially go after this market and start preparing themselves for a better IoT and connected way of managing the world. So I think that demand is still going to continue in 22 and 23. But the supply chain pressures and the pricing, overall the price pressures, as Sundar was saying, 40x for a container does have a trickle effect and a knock-on effect on everything that we have. So we'll have to see how that price pressure is going to still allow us to have that high demand growth opportunity for 22 and 23.
Okay. Thank you. So I mean, in summary, there, I mean, what we've got is a situation where you've got crisis-driven change. You've got business cases which are becoming more acute. It's easier to get them cost in because prices are going up, and obviously you've got the overall pandemic situation has accelerated a lot of things, and changes in consumption. So is that just an acceleration of what was happening before, or are we getting new types of customer now?
I think if I may start there, I think there are a couple of things happening. I know, at least from a cellular's perspective, because that's what we are focused on, and I think the other panelists will probably talk about from the other technology standards. At least on the cellular side, the push for the LTM and the narrowband IoT standards, both here and of course in the US, it's predominantly LTM, and in Europe with the narrowband IoT kind of getting pushed by the carriers. The jury is still out whether the narrowband IoT is really the best way to solve a lot of different use cases. But the customers are actually realizing that there is specific use cases where cellular technology is by far better, and especially things where you are not dependent on additional infrastructure. So call it the no infrastructure solution. And that's where things like a cellular-based solution really in a remote way, or the use case where a customer really needs actionable insight for indoor, in-transit, and outdoor. So if I have a thing or a complete business on a program that actually fits that use case, where it's sometimes indoor, sometimes it's in transit, and sometimes it's outdoor, and if it's a closed loop or an open loop system, then the customers really care about that, because that insight is critical, and that's basically creating a lot of different sub-use cases and demand in the market. And I think we are going to continue to see some of that still fruition. But ultimately, as Mike was saying, and I was seconding that argument, things break down on the cellular side on the TCO. So a lot of things, start off in a great way and go to the proof of concept or the proof of value stage, but then they are not able to actually create that conversion effect to create to a scale deployment. And that's where things are breaking down. And that has got nothing to do with whether we are building a turnkey solution or whether we are building parts of the solution. It's just economics and just numbers, and that don't add up in many cases. It's like 40 to 50% of them actually fail.
There's a couple of trends here over the last 10 years, almost maybe 5 years, sure. The cost of the IoT solution has been declining at the rate of between 15 to 20%. And the layers, the bundles we're talking about, are getting integrated and offered to builders as APIs or consumption in a much, much easier way. So what that has done is, 10 years ago, it was large manufacturers of cars or tractors that had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of assets to deploy, could afford to build these solutions. The big trend that we're seeing now is that people who have, even in the next 3 years, 5,000 units to deploy of something, a customized industrial filter, or concrete monitoring, can afford to deploy where they couldn't do this 3 years ago because the costs were still very high. So these bundles and the fact that the total pricing, there's still complexity. I don't want to say it's become so easy, but those business plans of 5,000 units are actually viable and have an ROI today. Then forget about whether it's cellular or LoRa or something else, but the business plans are becoming more and more deployable and commercially deployable at even small scales.
Yeah, so Jim, you asked about the newer sort of customers coming into IoT as part of your question. I can challenge anybody on this panel today if they are trying to get a home project done and trying to get a contractor out there to come and visit them, it's almost next to impossible. Because I know I'm going through that right now. I hear that across the board, right? And that's just, it might sound anecdotal, but if you are a company and you're trying to hire resources now to do things that in the past was you just hired somebody to go do it, it's not happening. You're not finding those people, right? So interestingly, we're having people that don't even know a thing about IoT, but they just have a paper-based processor. They have somebody that needed to go out and check an equipment and look at some things and that they used to do, are now looking to, basically they're saying, how can I get this into my system? And they're realizing that, well, IoT is a solution, right? We have customers that are in manufacturing where in the past, for them, it was just a lot easier to have a technician just go out to their customers and look at a production equipment, blender, whatever the case may be, in the plastics industry, and then say, oh, this is not working. It's not producing whatever data, or the capacity is not where it needs to be. They could tune it. They are all adopters for IoT, and and it's weird in a way. I think that the macro trends are all accelerating the adoption of IoT, and it's absolutely bringing new customers into IoT adoption.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just pausing so anyone else chip in. But thank you for those comments and answers. I'd like to spin back actually. So Ganesh mentioned the concept of TCO breakdown, and that and that implies that the costs of the project at scale rollout aren't entirely in line with what they were expected to be at the time of pilot, etc. I just wonder if anyone has any comments or thoughts on that. I'm not meant to nominate people, but I am going to nominate Mike because we've not heard from him yet.
Yeah, I think, and I think we've all experienced this. The part that is often misunderstood is, and it was covered a little bit earlier, there's a big difference between a prototype and a pilot and then going to scale. So that scaling of, okay, it's one thing to say I've put 500 of these sensors out and I did it in my best region with my highest skill set, group, for this IoT project. But then to say, okay, now I'm going to do a rollout of 50 or 100,000 devices, and there's just so many hidden costs there that if you don't design them in, the solutions to those in up front, you get out in the field and you find out that what you're really deploying is really a pilot scale solution that wasn't ready to go large scale. So, sometimes just, data costs and data overheads are misunderstood. Just the labor to install and maintain and through the life cycle of management, this is misunderstood. A lot of these connected, a lot of the centers around connected products and connected services, and this is coming from companies that were, they're deploying an asset, pest control trap. It's never been connected before. They've done this the same way for the last 50 or 100 years. There's just so many different elements that I think, that's where it kind of gets tripped up, is misunderstanding what it takes to truly scale. And that's where, working with, any of the partners here we've seen this many times, and we've learned often the hard way many times over and over. This is, okay, here's the difference between a 1,000 unit deployment and a 100,000 unit deployment. And those are things we need to design into the architecture up front. And then these companies won't have so many, trip and fall sort of moments. And those trip and fall moments are dangerous because, sooner or later, if a company trips and falls too many times, you're not going to get up and just keep deploying this. They're going to withdraw and say, hey, this didn't work for me. So that's what I think us as an ecosystem want to help our customers get through that.
Anyone else have anything to contribute on that? Okay, no, thank you. So I mean that's a clear benefit of these bundled solutions. You're working with a partner who can see some of these problems coming up and can help prepare for them. I mean, what are the other clear benefits of using some of these solutions and or these bundled solutions, and are there associated areas where they're perhaps not so suitable? Is there a sweet spot and then types of application which are outside of the sweet spot of this bundled approach?
I'll go first. I think again, it's, if you look at it from an industry perspective, I can't really think of an industry that may not be able to use these bundles because, most of the traditional industries out there, they have to go digital in some way, shape, or form. And if they have to go digital, right, they have to, there's no way for them to do that without really adopting IoT. And again, to Mike and Mobeen's point, they can do a pilot. They can have a ninja team go out there and prove it out, and we've all seen that. But if they really want to scale it, are they really going to be, managing certifications for their devices? Are they really going to be sourcing these devices? Are they really going to be, looking at connectivity across all the different, countries that they're going to operate in? Are they really going to be monitoring this? It's if you think about before the adoption of cloud, they were, a lot of these companies are stitching solutions together. This is going to go the same way from an IoT and IoT managed services perspective. Is that why would you want to do something that's not part of your core competency? And one way to accomplish that is with bundles, right? And even, traditionally technology challenged industries like healthcare are actually adopting IoT faster than they're actually adopting even digital tools, right? Because a lot of that stuff is still managed by companies like Epic, which kind of hold the data. But now they're trying to break free from that with IoT and with things like, we have a solution called the Clinical Health Telemetry Solution that allows you to collect RPM data from the patients, right? Anyway, so I think bundles in general solve, I would say, at least 90% of the problems out there. I can't really think of, if you're in an industry why you would want to put those pieces together where a bundle may not work. Maybe the other panelists have ideas around that.
Yeah, I would say that there is, we are seeing use cases being built that we just didn't imagine. Putting this inside of a fuel dispenser and sensors, industrial filters, sensors inside of concrete while it settles. I say the boring, the least exciting, the better. It just means that beyond the cars and the trucks and the large scale things that we know about, people are starting to sensorize every physical asset, and that's great. It takes time to get there, but we welcome 500 unit deployments, 1,000 unit deployments. So these are small deployments, and just last month we had a customer that was censoring some turtles in Australia. It was 200 turtles. And so in environmental, in agriculture, in areas where this was not traditionally thought of, and companies like us in the past had been looking at, where's the 100,000 unit deployment? I say, let's just focus on the 1,000 unit deployments now, because it is possible. And those flowers will bloom into forests, like, 3 to 5 years from now. So the encouraging part is that almost every industry, to Sundar's point, is starting to get into how can I sensorize my physical asset and get data in, and is it economically viable? And I think they're starting to find that it is.
Yeah, to Moby's point, I think there are two parts of the equation of seeing that customer benefit and whether it fits for some customers or not. Back to your question, Jim, in the Skywire side, we are kind of in the same world as what Blues is doing, where we're giving them the connectivity modem. The one thing that we don't do that Blues does is that Blues also gives you all the APIs and the cloud connectivity part. But our end customers are typically in the same kind of bucket where they are experimenting with a few hundreds or the thousands of units, finding that product market fit, and they're accelerating that. And what we have actually now started to see, a large customers, call it the Fortune 500 and the Fortune 1000 companies, they're actually coming in from the engineers, the design engineers, but then on the top, we also have people at the senior levels who are actually the key decision makers and who are actually cutting the check. They're also coming to us because they see the value prop for getting to that connectivity, the time to market, the overall reduced cost of development, decreasing all that friction is so much more beneficial that rather than they spending, call it 6, 12, 18, 24 months and call it the opportunity cost and the actual dollars invested in doing a development, when you add all of that, it adds up anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. And then the worst thing, they find that they did it all the wrong way because they're not experts in cellular connectivity or in IoT in general. So they come to us, and there is really a clear, the way I coined it as part of my strategy was, there's a clear opportunity for us to engage with those customers really early on in that journey and handhold them back to what Wameen was saying, and to essentially bring them into that scale effect. But again, some may fall off that scale and they may not see the value, and some may stick and we will see that value. But then the other example that I want to talk about was the asset tracker and the battery powered stuff. We are actually seeing a whole different slew of customers really seeing value in once a day, couple of times a day kind of check-in. You don't need to have real time. You don't need every second of monitoring and reporting back, because there is a whole slew of other use cases where people are actually seeing tremendous amount of benefit just using a battery powered, as long as it's reliable connectivity, because they are connecting the unconnected. So reliable connectivity is table stake. And second, they essentially are long battery life, because they're going to actually be deployed somewhere remote in the field. The whole truck roll example that Mike was saying, it defeats the purpose if I have to go and recover the device and fix something. So those are kind of the two value prop and the benefits that people are seeing when they want to go and start scaling this up. But most of the times people will start small, and if there is value in it, they are scaling as well. And there's a clear benefit on the value that they see from their business perspective.
One small point I'll just throw in real quickly is there's a real danger in don't confuse the solution bundle for end users and OEMs as the end-to-end solution itself. Because we, and I'll speak a little bit for myself, and we see the world through a hardware lens and through a middleware type lens. And we serve a lot of different industries. So we can get you data from your asset up into your application, and we can put a bundle together that takes away all that friction. But we know nothing about how to manage a healthcare operation. We know nothing about how to manage a restaurant or compliance rules in quick serve restaurants. There's got to be somebody with that domain focus at the end that puts the application layer on the top. So that's a really critical point is, we put these bundles together and we'll get you data from these sensors and put it in a simple little dashboard for you. But that's different than managing a healthcare facility. There's application experts in that. So use the bundles to prove out your business case and value, but that's to justify the little bit of expense you're going to need at the end to do, maybe through APIs, to integrate that data into your application that's already expert in your particular domain.
Thank you. Yes, that's a helpful contribution. And then there was mention earlier about core versus non-core processors, and in many ways the IT space, without the O, the IT space. When procuring things, a couple of key considerations have been the degree to which the solution is integrated with a core business. So something that's highly integrated, you might want to build yourself, and something that's much more peripheral, you might want to procure as a turnkey solution. And also the potential to use the solution as a competitive differentiator. So if it is a route to competitive differentiation, you want more control than if it isn't. So on the one side, you might get a connected parking solution for deployment at a headquarters, and that you pretty much definitely want as a product. But things which are deeply integrated and differentiating, you might want to control yourself. There's also a question about the devices that are being enabled and how productized they are when they actually go to end users. One downstream, and I guess there's a question of risk. Are the dividing lines between build versus buy falling in slightly different places now in the IoT enablement space that we're talking about here versus the more traditional IT space?
I'll start where Mike left off just now. Maybe Core has a couple of end-to-end applications that are ready to be consumed out of the box, but I think the rest of us are not experts in domains or verticals. We may know a lot about certain use cases and industries to build even the lower 5 layers, if you will, of a solution. But there's these top 2 layers that are not our domain. And the reason for that is that outside of 2 or 3 at scale use cases that are repeatable, IoT still is highly fragmented in terms of how it's built and how it's consumed. Ganesh talked about asset tracking. At surface, it seems like asset tracking is the same, but within asset tracking, there's at least half a dozen different subsegments. Are you cold chain monitoring? Are you monitoring it on a global level? Are you regional? Is satellite involved or not? What kind of sensory is in there? What kind of accuracy of sensors are involved? Is the asset tracker connecting to something else? Is this for theft prevention, or is it for supply chain tracking? So just in that one category of use cases, there are so many solution elements that affect all of the layers. It is very difficult if you are an IoT provider, you have to focus on layers where you can scale. And that's what we're doing. But other companies, like, for example, in fleet management, there are companies out there that have built a name and a repeatable business model and a repeatable solution. But finding those repeatable things is not yet apparent. I had one of our salespeople was recently visiting an HVAC conference. And it seems like, and I'm just using anecdotal example here, this is not quantitative by any means. It seems like that industry, all of the HVAC manufacturers are becoming much more mature, and there are players now in that space that are trying to put end-to-end solutions in that space. And we'll see same things happen in other industries and other use cases. So I think if you take out vehicles, tractors, maybe some basic supply chain, those are, or maybe alarm panels. There are 3 or 4 industries that you have seen millions and millions of deployments and repeatable. But others, it's just, it's an open field right now.
Absolutely. I'm just going to highlight thank you for that. Very, very insightful. I'm just going to highlight that we've got a little over 3 minutes left now. I think we extend just a little bit. Other thoughts on similar topics from anyone else? Okay. In that case, we've just got a few minutes left. It might be interesting to finish off with some use case examples, some situations where the use of an IoT bundle has really enabled somebody to do something quickly or in a very different way, or has really generated a result of note.
I can give you a quick example on that. It just happened in the last literally few weeks. One of the largest industrial equipment rental company in the world, they accidentally found out their 3G systems are actually getting turned off within the month. So somebody actually wanted to have a replacement because their entire rental equipment business runs on the idea that they can actually measure where their equipment is, how long it has been running. It basically drives their entire billing mechanism. We were able to really bring that entire offer very quickly up and running using our battery-powered products within a few days, and plugging into their existing systems, using our APIs and providing them that bundled approach so that they're not focused on the connectivity side of it, the device management and the hardware itself. All of that is taken care of. The one thing that they need to focus on is their business logic and the application. So for them to transition over from their legacy systems to the new ways of doing it was a matter of days without much of disruption. So now, since they see the concept in action and they feel confident that this can actually work, they want to flip the switch and scale it to a much higher level so that they have the least amount of disruption to that business. So this is a real world problem that I'm dealing with right here, right now, and I'm sure that there are other examples from the other panelists.
Absolutely, that's quite an impressive example for those of us who can remember this industry 10 years or so ago. It would have worked differently then. We're just down to the last couple of minutes. Any other examples?
Yeah, I'll give you a 30-second.
Sure, go ahead, Sundar.
Yeah, so we have a customer that's in the security space. Again, one of the newer customers that really doesn't know a whole lot about IoT, but they were asked to equip a a whole city's buses with cameras, worked with us, leverage our solution. They deployed it. The city is not our customer. This aggregator is our customer. The supplier is our customer. They actually equipped it, and actually they deployed it not only here but also in Mexico. It so happened, and this is in the news, that one of these vans that they actually deployed it got kidnapped in Mexico, and they were actually able to use the camera and the tracking to identify not only where it was, where it ended up being, and it actually also used the in-cab camera to identify who these folks were. So if you guys look up like Kabat and Core, it was covered by BBC and a bunch of folks. So it's just a really cool use case from IoT impacting an industry.
Okay, thank you. We're officially out of time, but I think we're allowed to run over by just a couple of minutes. So, Mike Mabeen, if you have a couple of examples and you can keep it down to about 30 seconds, I think we'll be okay.
Great. So my example is something that's on our website and people will read in detail. Agilix Healthcare, they make a grip for cancer patients. And this was really that sort of spurred by COVID because they had cancer patient who couldn't get to the doctors or practitioners, because of safety reasons. And one of the biggest predictors of whether your chemo is working or not, or medicine is working or not, is your muscle strength. So they built this grip, which a patient uses every day, and they look at the muscle strength every day and report it to the practitioner. And only if you are on the decline on your muscle strength would you go and see a practitioner. So this was born out of a need in COVID for cancer patients. It was a feel-good kind of a solution, but they were able to put it together within a few weeks in prototype, and then within a few months in production.
Yeah, I could give one other real quick one that was accelerated by COVID for us was digital food safety. So all of a sudden, groceries were doing curbside delivery, and they needed to relocate and put small coolers to keep your delivery cold until you came and picked it up. Well, obviously, their in-store coolers are all monitored and part of their compliance solution, but very quickly they had to deploy smaller coolers in different areas. So they were able to use a bit of our quick start box and very, very quickly in days validate that, yep, they could get wireless sensor coverage out to that shopping cart area, out to the front of the building, wherever it happened to be. And almost as quickly as they could reconfigure the store to service that, they were able to extend their digital food compliance safety out to those new locations.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think at that time we've run out of time. So I should just say thank you to my panelists, Mike Fahrion of MultiTech, Mabeen Khan of Blues Wireless, Ganesh Sivaram of NimbeLink, and Sundar Somasundaran of Core. Thank you very much, guys. It's clear that the world's changing. If we can, as I mentioned earlier, if we compare that to what we've discussed here to what we might have discussed 10 years ago, it's a world apart. And long may it continue.
Thank you very much, Jim, for moderating this morning, and thanks to all our panelists, and of course to our audience as well. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. I tell you what, I learned a lot about scaling IoT on this session, so I've got to go back to the book, so to speak, and study up, because it seems like there's a lot going on that I wasn't necessarily aware of. So, great job. Really appreciate your time. And to everyone, stay safe and stay well out there. So thanks so much. And join us for our next event, which is coming up on April 7th. And that'll be about 5G, primarily about using 5G for emergency services. Please join us for that. A link to register for that will be coming up on your screen just as soon as we sign off here.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.